Google became my customer, Xbox, Samsung, Intel, all these big companies, Oracle, because I could go and charge them, and you're gonna try out a few things. The biggest investment is gonna be your time. And even if your business doesn't work, right, worst case scenario, you get much more learning than paying for a university degree.
Hi, we're here today with Amir Anzur. He started an interesting university, and it's called Webpreneur Academy, and you can Google it up. Amir, how are you doing today?
I'm excellent, thanks.
So, Amir, you were born in...
I was born in a place called Hull in England.
It's like hell?
Yeah, Hull with just U. It's about 2-3 hours east of London, in the UK. So, yeah. I'm originally from Pakistan, born there, then moved away to Belgium, grew up there, and then came back to England to do my university. Currently, I'm in Dubai, and I've just moved around a lot in my whole life, actually.
So why the American accent then?
Actually, I grew up in an international school in Brussels, and I realized, actually from a very early age, when I was 12, 13, I realized that I wanted to be one of the cooler kids, and if everyone was sounding a certain way, I wanted to sound that way, you know. It was so, but also I just found that American accents, if anything in this global economy, are easier to pick up. Even though I spent a lot of my life in England, if you go in England and you live in Manchester and Liverpool, which are only half an hour away, accents are completely different. In London, they're all different and mixed up. American accents, because you hear them in the movies, a lot of people speak it, and so it's easier to pick up, even though I've lived most of my life outside the US.
Cool. So what did you go for school for? Like in Switzerland, what were you studying?
My bachelor's degree was computer science with business management in the University of Manchester in the UK. My MBA, my Master's of Business Administration, was in Switzerland. And I did it in entrepreneurship and leadership. So, yeah.
So that's why you became an entrepreneur?
Actually, I became an entrepreneur well before that. I really believe the best way to become an entrepreneur is actually do it. Doing an MBA or doing school and formal education is really another form of working in a corporation, because, you know, you have a template that's set for you. So the teacher says, here's what you do to get an A, right? Here's what you do to get a B. And that's, so you're in a organization, really. You have to get up at 8, you have to turn up, you know, leave at 5 or whatever it is, the hours are regulated. Whereas when you become an entrepreneur, you don't have anyone telling you what to do whatsoever. So you can wake up and go in if you want to. You can work from wherever if it's up to you if you want to turn up to a meeting, don't want to turn up. And so that punishment and all that stuff, all the rewards and everything is up to you rather than a teacher setting it up for you. So I think the best thing that I learned about entrepreneurship was actually starting it. I started when I was 16. I organized school ski trips and I did a lot of stuff in school. I started multiple businesses. A lot of them didn't work.
Well, the failures are the best teachers. So what were the ones which failed you, and which you think were the failures?
I would say probably one of my biggest one was in 1999 when I was, you know, I had a good career. I was top graduate in my university for computing, had a great career that I was going through, and then I thought, okay, if I'm so smart, I should be able to make money for myself. I was at that point making $2,000 to $3,000 a day for my company, right? because as a consultant, that's what I could charge out at. I thought, okay, if I'm so smart and I'm working with companies like Microsoft, helping them make money, I should be able to do it for myself. I left. I took leave from my job. I set up. At that time, the .com was really big.
And you were working with Accenture?
I was working for Accenture in London. And I heard about this .com stuff, and I looked into the internet, and I thought, wow, this is really going to change a lot of lives, especially for a guy who comes from an emerging world economy and understands the West. I saw how the internet was going to, there was going to be TV on it. There was going to be all these things on it. It's going to have a huge impact. And I thought, okay, I've got a lot of ideas. I moved to the States, I moved to California, and then to Las Vegas, set up stuff. And within 9 months, I had zero funds. I mean, I basically had started it all on credit cards, completely messed up. I took on, it took me another 3 years to pay off that debt. So just be careful when you start a business. And so that was it, because then I came back and I thought, maybe I am crazy. Maybe I see the world, and, because at that time, not many people, especially in England or in Asia, really got what the internet was about. And so I thought maybe I was just being dumb. I had a lot of self-doubt, and that's the other thing when you go through business, is about having that confidence. And I lost a lot of it because I'd done well at so many other things in school and university, and a failure in business when you've told all your friends you're going to do a certain project and certain things are going to work a certain way. And then, 9 months later, a year later, I was back at work and I was in debt and all this stuff. So that was actually, to deal with that, the emotional side was actually quite a tough part of it. In hindsight, it's led me to things like Webpreneur Academy, because now all the failures I went through, I'm thinking, whoa, wait a minute. All these people that started asking me, how do you do this and that, when I did start making money online, I was like, wait a minute, that idea he's trying, I just lost a lot of money doing exactly the same thing, and I can save people a lot of time and effort if I teach them about sales, about marketing, because that's actually at the core of any business. I teach them about hiring people, about management, about cost cutting, all these things that I learned the hard way. I can save people a lot of time and money on it. So that's, in hindsight, when I look back now, failure was a good thing and led me to start up Webpreneur Academy. But at that time, as I said, it was a tough thing to go through.
The business you were telling me we had to do something with the SMS, it sounded pretty interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more what it was?
Yeah, okay. So second business I had was in 2003. I was again looking for ideas to get into, and I saw that SMS, text messaging, was going to be bigger. And I saw that in the US it was still early, and I saw that SMS was really the poor man's email, right? So even in Africa, in Pakistan and India, SMS is big. So I started to think about how I could use SMS in a way that would help people, and came up with this idea that you could shop using SMS. So let's say if you and I are sitting in a cafe and you tell me about a great book I should read, or a DVD or something. Usually what happens is, if I don't have a pen and paper, I'll forget about it, right? So by the time I get home, I'll forget about it, and Amazon has lost out on the sale. So I developed a system where you type the word book, space, Harry Potter. It would go online, it would search on Amazon, it would come back and say Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling for $8.99, ships in 1 day. And the very first time that you use the system, it would ask you for your email address. So you would just text back like Amir@amiranzur.com. Then it would send me an email with all the links to Amazon. So now what happened is, you've told me about a book, Harry Potter. I've texted book space Harry Potter. It's gone on Amazon. It's found me the stuff, so I know the price and availability. Then when I go back into my office next day, a week later, I log in. The first thing I do is usually check my email. I can click through and buy it. and then I would make a percentage of those sales. So if you spent, let's say, $10 on a book, I'd make $1.
So you were an affiliate for Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. And now you could use that system, because if you're selling books and CDs and DVDs, maybe they only sell for $10. But imagine you're in a retail store, you could text electronics or a camera and digital camera and these things, you could save yourself 50, 60, 70, a couple of $100 online compared to offline, and I'd make $20, $30, $40 on that, on each click-through, right? So if you're comparing MacBooks or high-end products, it makes more sense.
So then you went back to Accenture?
Actually, so this product, I started it, and I quickly realized I didn't have the marketing to really get a lot of consumers on it. So I changed the business model. I started providing these types of services to big companies. So Google became my customer, Xbox, Samsung, Intel, all these big companies, Oracle, because I could go and charge them, let's say, tens of thousands of dollars to do a service like this, rather than having to advertise to consumer. So what I realized is, getting your word out to consumers is a lot more work, right? Because you need to be able to spread your word. Everyone's busy with their own lives. But if I go to a company like Google, for instance, they were a customer of mine, I could charge them, $10,000 for a product. I need to make one sale and make decent returns. And the way that Google used it, for instance, was at the time I was living in England, when Google had an issue that when they gave out these AdWords, so they have these AdWords that they sell, and they give out $30 or £30 vouchers all over the UK. But what was happening is a lot of entrepreneurs from India and China were taking these vouchers, because online it was hard to track who was taking the vouchers. So what they did is we developed a system for them so that people could text the word Google and get a unique voucher that they could then use. And because it was coming from a mobile, we could track the fact that it was a British mobile. So we weren't having entrepreneurs in China making off with loads of free vouchers. We're actually having UK-based entrepreneurs do this. So that was a business. I basically stuck with that business. I sold it off.
To Google?
No, I sold it to another person in that industry. It was mobile financial services. The reason for that was, after a few years of running it, I realized that my passion wasn't in text messaging. I wanted to do something different, and I realized I'd invented something in mobile, and I thought I want to go into an industry like education that has more of an impact. Me helping people sell more books, it wasn't as much of a turn on anymore. So I switched my field, went in MBA, worked in government for education.
What were you doing for them?
I worked with the government of Dubai, Knowledge and Human Development Authority, where I set the strategy for public school systems and universities. And also worked with Abu Dhabi Education Council for a year, helping them devise their internet strategy for the schools, digital strategies. So
did they listen to you?
It's tougher. It went well. I really learned a lot about education, but I also learned about working in governments and big systems. And so there was a lot of change, and actually a lot of great stuff is happening in the United Arab Emirates. They spend something like 23% of their GDP on education. It's huge amounts of money that's going into the system. But I also wanted to do something for more emerging countries, So obviously, if I'm getting paid here, they're going to do well, the next generation of Emiratis. And being from Pakistan, friends in Kenya and all these, thought, what can we do to really help this part of the world? And came up with this concept of Webpreneur Academy, which essentially teaches people how to create wealth for themselves. Because if you learn the things that we're teaching in this academy about how to work from home, how to set up your business, you can actually be based now anywhere in the world, and everyone is on the same level playing field. I'll give you an example. In the old economy, if I wanted to learn math or English, my success was determined by my teacher. So if I was in a village out in the middle of nowhere, oftentimes the teacher teaching me English didn't know English that well, right? And maybe even the math lessons, they didn't really care. Maybe there was 100 people in the classroom, so if I fell behind, I was really going behind, right? Now if you can go online to a site like khanacademy.org, right? khanacademy.org, and you have all the math lessons from K to 12 in there, right? So some guys made video tutorials with all the lessons on it. So if I want to see 3rd grade algebra, I can see that. Now, what is so cool about that? Now, what's so cool about it is I have the ability from my little village to learn from the best in the world. And that person, that teacher, could be sitting in New York, could be sitting in Bangladesh, could be sitting in Tokyo. But that one teacher can make one great lesson and amplify it to the world. So now these people that are sitting in villages, they're saying, wow, that person that's in a village in Pakistan has the same level of education as a guy based in New York. Now, so that's one huge advantage, so that teaching can really be scaled, right? So, and people like me that wouldn't go into the field of education traditionally, because I'd make a lot more money doing other things and I'd get bored teaching the same content every year. I can now spend my time on education and actually even monetize that. So as I'm doing now, right, I'm teaching, but I can monetize it in several ways. So those are really exciting fields. The other thing that I always found whenever I visited Pakistan and I've gone to, South Africa and all these places, is I found that there was a lag in knowledge. So when I was outsourcing my business and I'd go to a local store in Islamabad, for instance, I'd see that they would be advertising for, there would be a book in there for PHP 3.0 in the local bookstore, right? And it would be a hand-me-down book and second-hand book that's come down all the way there. And PHP had moved on to version 5. So the local person who was in, let's say, their early 2000s, going to the bookstore thinking they're getting the best in education, buying a book, it's out of date by the time they've got it, right? Now, when we have the internet, everything happens at the same time. So now, if you look at a system like Amazon Kindle and a lot of books are going digital, you will eventually have, every kid have a Kindle-like machine, which are about $60, $70 now, and I'm sure they're going to come at $20. And that same book, whether you're in a village in the middle of, outside Peshawar, or in Kabul, or in New York, that book can be released at the same time around the world, right? So that means now everyone's on an even level field because the knowledge they're getting at the same time. Before, if you went to Harvard, if you went to MIT, if you went to all these great universities, you had huge advantages. Now, we can all study ourselves, get the latest in knowledge, and now our ability to create wealth is not determined by what university we went to, which is usually determined by how much money our parents had and what passport we had, but it's determined by our own ambitions and our own willingness to learn, and our own willingness to teach ourselves, and our own willingness to create businesses and start things out. Same goes for passports. So let's say in 2-3 decades ago, you had the equivalent of Bill Gates who started Microsoft, and you had the Afghani version, Abdullah from Afghanistan, who had the same idea for Microsoft. Now, Bill Gates was at an advantage. Bill Gates was going around telling his idea to the world, and Abdullah from Kabul is waiting in the visa queue. He can't get out of Afghanistan, right? So what happens if you have a great idea for a startup in Kabul? You're stuck to the local market. Now, that same Abdullah can create the YouTube videos. He can start communicating to the New York Times straight from Kabul and get his idea out to the world. Now, in theory, that Abdullah in Kabul has the same advantages and disadvantages as Bill Gates does in Seattle. In practice, there's still some limitations. Obviously, if you're based in New York, you're going to network with a lot more media, etc. But in a lot more, you're going to see these startups coming up for these villages across the world where you couldn't do that before. Americans had all the advantage. So everyone in the world knew Tom Cruise. Why? Because he was on Hollywood. So Hollywood movies spread to the world, and if you wanted to spread your ideas, you had to move to New York, LA, all these places. Now we're gonna see that, I'm in Dubai right now, but I could have been anywhere, able to communicate my ideas to the world. So people who are ready for this shift, we're gonna see a lot more of us creating wealth. I'm just an example. I'm moving out to the village. I like working in Kenya and in Pakistan rather than going out in Silicon Valley where I'm just another engineer. And I believe that the next Googles of the world are going to come from this part of the world, in the bedroom. As long as these young entrepreneurs that are coming up, they can master the art of PR, marketing, and not just be engineers, techies creating stuff. If they can master all the other parts of creating a business, that's where you're going to see wealth being created.
So don't you think that people in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh are at an advantage where the telecommunication is extremely cheaper, like 1/100th of the cost in the US? You can call the US for a penny a minute, whereas in the US you can't even call for a penny a minute. And these are cell phones, and on top of that you can hire a programmer for $100 a month, 100 US a month, and you can't never do that in Silicon Valley. And then Facebook is allowing this PR which you're talking about, and LinkedIn. I mean, you can link up to all the people you want to network through LinkedIn and Facebook. So what do you have to say about that? I mean, what does Webpreneur teach in networking, in social networking?
Look, there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to the East and the West, right? So everything, if you're a true entrepreneur, you'll make it into your advantage. Now, how would I start a business if I was doing it now, right? You have these people in the East. It's true, things are cheaper. So in Bangladesh, India, yes, you can hire cheaper programmer, cheaper phone calls, etc. On the other hand, you also probably have less money to dispose of as well, right? So for many years, I was running my business by having a job which paid me great income. And then I hired programmers in India and Pakistan that did my work. So because I was working in the West, my salary was here, and I could hire someone in the East whose salary was here. Now, what we're gonna see is that normal people in the States and in Europe are going to become venture capitalists. So if I have a salary where I'm earning $4,000 or $5,000 a month, which is an okay salary in a lot of the West, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I'm going to take one of these bright kids from one of the top universities, pay him $300 and give him a share in that business as well, right? And then guide them into creating some sort of product for me, right? So let's say if I'm based in London now, I'm working in a bank, and I know that there's a need for certain type of software. What I would do is hire someone in the East, pay them that money, use Skype to communicate, project manage them a little bit. I know I'm busy with my day job, but my opportunity cost is too great, right? I can earn more money. For instance, my last job, I was making $15,000 a month, right? Tax-free. It's hard for me to go into a startup. And when I go into a startup full-time, already now I have the stress of making $15,000, which is quite a lot for a startup. Whereas what I can do is I can keep that job as long as possible, keep earning that income, hire someone at $500 an hour, $500 a month, who's probably even smarter than I am, right? But he's maybe doesn't have the degrees and all the branding, and get him to work on this product full time. And I can even hire 3-4 of him and keep my job until I think it's time that I can also leave it, right? So the East and West are going to start coordinating together more, right? So you're going to have people, I tell you, because I worked in the corporate world and it sucks having a job. You know, you've got, I mean, there's a lot of great jobs and some people love them, but some people have that need to follow a passion and follow a different path. And so they're bored. What I would say to them is take your weekends, take your evenings, and work on your business idea. It's cheaper now to start a business than ever. Imagine in the old economy, you needed a phone line, you needed an office, you needed a secretary. You can get all those virtually now. A phone call costs $10 a month, you know, so you can really cheapen your costs, start on the other side of the world, right? What I would say also about the East, from being Pakistan myself, is sometimes there's a lot of bright talent. They don't actually know what to do with it, right? So what you can find is even friends that you say, hey, let's just do a business together. Right? You know, instead of just watching TV on the weekends, why don't we just use that small screen to start making some money? So what you'll find is maybe it means some sacrifices for these people and ignoring a few shadi invitations and all these things that they go to every weekend, and start saying, okay, let's come up with some idea and create some wealth, right? And what do you have to do to get a business off the ground? You basically have to help people in some way, solve a problem. And you're gonna try out a few things. The biggest investment is gonna be your time. And even if your business doesn't work, right? Worst case scenario, you get much more learning than paying for a university degree, right? I can assure you, like those people that think they'd be happy to pay $100,000 to go to Harvard or Yale or any of these companies, if you take even 20,000 of that and put it into a business and get real experience, real life, it's much better opportunity. In the old economy, yes, we needed the good degrees in order to get the good job, because that's what got you a job. In this new economy, I tell you, you do not care right now, if you're listening to this interview, what degree I have, what my background is. You want me to know if I can help you in your job, in your business, whatever it is. And it's the same. So all these people, all these young kids, I'll give you another example. If you're a kid from Pakistan, you could be the top graduate in your university. You could have a great work experience. And you then try to compete in the global economy. Just because your nationality says Pakistan, your ability to earn reduces already, right? Because if you go to a site like Odesk, the first thing it'll say is, what's your nationality? Pakistan, India, Philippines, your income is here. People, US, Australian, UK, and I've worked with both sides of the world. Brains are brains, right? People are people. But we have this mental block with nationalities and passportism, right? Now, what would I do? I would be looking to create my own personal brand, right? So if you go amiranzur.com or amiranzur.com, or you connect to me on Facebook or whatever, now to the world, I've become a person. I'm not just another Pakistani, right? Or I'm not just another British guy or whatever nationality, because actually people would judge you by your nationality. I think of a Chinese and I picture a certain picture in my wall, in my head, and so do you, right? And we think of an African a certain way. But the fact is there's 1.3 billion Chinese, and they're individuals. But now if I can go to someone's blog, if I can connect to them or see them on video, they've become an individual, right? And so already they've differentiated themselves from all the mass media news and all this stuff, because frankly, when you see Pakistan news, you see, terrorism and the world falling apart. But when you actually meet a Pakistani, you actually meet these techies, and we're having an actual conversation, you're seeing bright, smart people that are, innovative, creative, all that stuff, which gets lost. So if I'm applying for a job, frankly, I'm lost, because there's no way I can compete and create wealth like an American. Because if I have American on my CV, my resume, my income will go up. So if I'm Pakistani, if I'm Bangladeshi, I'd be looking to be an entrepreneur. Are you happy to be making second tier incomes just because of your passport? Or do you want to let the world judge you? Because frankly, even if Facebook was made by an Afghani and you love the functionality, you wouldn't care. But if you're hiring, you would judge that person and you pay them accordingly to that salary. So if you really want to create true wealth for yourself, create your brand, whether it be personal or it be your business brand, and go sell to the world. You're not restricted to the local market. I was giving you an example earlier of getting my hair cut, which was, in Pakistan I went, Islamabad, 40 rupees, which is 60 cents. And in Switzerland it's $65. So you have that differentiation that people can do and create wealth.
Awesome, Amir. I think people who are watching this would definitely be provoked to start thinking differently. I would encourage you guys to, add Amir on Facebook, follow him on Twitter, watch his videos, and definitely check out the videos on Webpreneur Academy and learn yourself and get yourself out of the small well you're living in, and start thinking differently. Thank you so much, Amir, and looking forward to hearing from you more.
Thanks for your time, man.